Hey guys, I wanted to make this video because I wanted to make a episode 9 theory video that primarily focused on how I think the prequels are going to come into play with episode 9. J.J. Abrams had said that episode 9 was going to tie in with the prequels, and I think it's going to do more than just tie in with the prequels. I think characters from the prequels, such as Anakin, ObiWan, Padme, and Palpatine, are going to have a heavy presence in episode 9. In one of my other theory videos, I talked about how I thought Obi-Wan and Anakin could be in episode 9, but I'm going to briefly talk about that again for the purpose of the video, since this video is focusing mostly on characters from the prequels and how they can return in episode 9 and how their presence can affect the story. Also, I'm going to talk about the marketing from a marketing perspective and what has been happening with the expanded universe storylines such as Star Wars Rebels, why I think characters like Anakin and Obi-Wan are going to have an impact in episode 9. I haven't talked about how I think Palpatine's role is going to come into play for episode 9, and with some recent Star Wars Rebels storylines that happen in the finale, it makes me really think that Palpatine's presence will be in episode 9. So I want to talk about that as well. I'm also going to talk about how I think storylines that have happened in the prequels are going to affect episode 9. And I'm going to talk about how The Last Jedi was very, very similar to Revenge of the Sith. So I'm going to start with Anakin, and I'm going to try to be brief with Anakin. If you guys watched my episode 9 theory video, you know how I talked about that it wasn't revealed to Kylo that Vader was his grandfather until the canon novel Bloodline, where it was exposed in front of the Senate. So obviously Kylo doesn't know the whole story. He doesn't know why Anakin really went to the dark side, and Snoke, he's not going to tell him the truth. So I think Anakin is going to appear to Kylo as a Force ghost and tell him what really happened. So if you watched my recent Kylo and Rey video, you know I talked about how there was a new short that was released by the Forces of Destiny, and it was about Anakin and Padme. They're not keeping the story of Anakin and Padme just swept under the rug. They had a new short in 2018, and I don't think it was a coincidence that the Forces of Destiny short with Anakin and Padme was released at the same time of The Last Jedi being released on DVD. Considering how much Anakin and Padme's relationship is so much like Kylo and Rey, I feel like that will have a lot of significance in episode 9. And when I watch the throne room scene, all I can think of is Obi-Wan is standing there as a Force ghost, and he's like, I'm having deja vu this again. So let's move on to Obi-Wan Kenobi. So John Williams had said that he didn't think Rey was a nobody and that he didn't believe that for a second. Thank you, John Williams. Thank you. Also, a couple people have told me about The Last Jedi novelization. I haven't read it yet. And they said that when Rey is in front of Snoke, that Snoke says in the novelization that Rey is more powerful than he could have ever imagined. That sounds so much like the line in New Hope when Obi-Wan says to Vader, "Strike me down now and I will become more powerful than you can imagine." So first of all, I trust John Williams. He has done the music for Star Wars for decades, and he has to create the music. So he has to have an idea of what's going on with the story to create the mood and the atmosphere. And Kylo's theme music is very similar to Vader's theme. Rey's theme is very similar to Obi-Wan's. Secondly, going back to the whole more powerful than you can imagine quote. When I rewatched New Hope and I rewatched all the Star Wars movies before I saw Last Jedi, when I watched that scene, I wondered if that applied to Rey. I remember thinking when I rewatched that scene with Vader and Obi-Wan fighting in New Hope, I thought, does this have new meaning now with Rey being in the picture? Now, if you guys have watched my videos, you know how much I want Rey to be Obi-Wan's granddaughter. You know how much I've talked about how she could be. And I have talked about the marketing, and I've talked about the personality similarities between Obi-Wan and the story similarities between Obi-Wan and Rey. And if you guys have watched my videos, you know I would have been fine with Rey being a nobody if that was established from the very beginning. And they cannot act like they haven't ridden off the hype of Rey being related to someone, because they marketed that for 2 years and advertised that for 2 years. All of the interviews were about who was Rey. There have been articles from all kinds of magazines guessing who she was, and it was talked about so much on the internet. There was so much buzz about it. And in interviews such as Jimmy Kimmel, they always asked questions about Rey's identity, Rey's parentage, and none of the cast said anything about it. So they can't act like suggesting Rey being related to someone hasn't been their selling point, because suggesting that she is related to someone, that has been their selling point. By the way, have you guys seen the How It Should Have Ended for The Last Jedi? I absolutely loved that they had, so during the throne room scene, they have Obi-Wan show up as a Force ghost, and he says, "I'm Obi-Wan Kenobi, and this is my granddaughter." And he says, "Remember, Rey, these are your first steps." I was so happy because I was like, I know I wasn't the only person thinking that in the movie that she was a Kenobi. I want to talk about Battlefront 2. And this is something that I haven't talked about. And I feel like the cover of Battlefront 2 is a marketing strategy for Rey to be a Kenobi. And if she's not, I really want someone to sit me down and explain to me the choice of this cover. So this is the cover for Battlefront 2, and we got Rey to the far left, Iden's in the middle, and to the far right we got Darth Maul. So it makes sense that Iden's in the middle because Iden is the main character for the story campaign. It makes sense that Rey is on the cover because Rey is the heroine for the new film series. Now, Darth Maul is a very popular character in Star Wars. He's a popular bad guy. But he's not the iconic villain of Star Wars. He's not Vader. He's not Palpatine. Rey and Darth Maul never fight each other. They never meet each other. And you'd think that Kylo would be on the opposite side because he fights Rey. And Kylo is a main character from the new series. And he's the grandson of Darth Vader. Now, the only logical explanation that I can think of why Rey and Darth Maul are on the front cover of Battlefront 2 and they're across from each other is because Rey is Obi-Wan's granddaughter and Darth Maul was Obi-Wan's rival. Now, Darth Maul wasn't just Obi-Wan's rival. Also, Darth Maul killed Satine, Obi-Wan's love. Now, if Rey is the granddaughter of Satine and Obi-Wan, that means Rey is across from Darth Maul on this cover, across from the killer, from her grandmother's murderer. If Rey isn't related to Obi-Wan, I really want someone to explain to me, seriously explain to me why they have Rey across from Darth Maul and why they set up the cover this way. Also, Obi-Wan is not in Battlefront 2. You can't play as Obi-Wan. Another medium that I thought was a marketing tool for Rey being related to Obi-Wan is the Forces of Destiny. There's a little Forces of Destiny short where Rey is with BB-8, and I'll put the link in the description box so you guys can go watch it. And Rey calls BB-8 her little friend. Who else says that? "Come here, my little friend." So when I watched that, I was like, oh my gosh, it sounds so much like Obi-Wan. When I watched The Last Jedi and Obi-Wan wasn't in the movie, my first thought was, okay, he's not in this because he is related to Rey. And I know Rian Johnson had said that he didn't have Luke see Obi-Wan as a Force ghost because Mark Hamill interacted with Sir Alec Guinness, not Ewan McGregor, but they could have even had audio. Like, they could have even had Luke just hear Obi-Wan's voice from the original series. Even though Obi-Wan wasn't in The Last Jedi, he still had a presence. When Luke said to Kylo, "Strike me down now and I'll always be with you," those lines were so similar to Obi-Wan's "Strike me down" lines from New Hope. I remember watching interviews before The Last Jedi, and Mark Hamill was talking about how in the original series, his character Luke was kind of clueless because he was talking about Obi-Wan Kenobi to Obi-Wan Kenobi, and he was saying how Obi-Wan was right there in front of him, and he obviously couldn't see that he was Obi-Wan. So I remember thinking, is that a clue? Because I felt like when I was watching The Last Jedi, it seemed to me that she was Obi-Wan's granddaughter. And I thought, oh, is he saying that Luke is clueless again? That he can't see who Rey is? That the audience can't see who Rey is? And during the interviews, they kept bringing up the whole thing with Vader being revealed as Luke's father. And Mark Hamill was saying that, the lines were originally, "You don't know the truth, Obi-Wan killed your father." And he said, oh, what a great twist. The hero is the villain, the hero is bad. And I remember thinking, is this a clue for something? Because they kept saying it over and over again. And I felt like it was because in The Last Jedi, Luke was this great hero and he almost killed his nephew. So that was the twist, that the hero was about to do something bad. Like I've said before, I think Obi-Wan would be the perfect character to be related to Rey, and it would make sense and it would tie everything together. He is a beloved character. He's an original character. He was in the original film trilogy. He was in the prequel trilogy. He was in the Star Wars animated clone show. He was in Rebels. He's been in a bunch of Star Wars mediums, and his voice was heard in Force Awakens, the new trilogy. I also feel like it would be so perfect if Rey was related to Obi-Wan, because if Kylo and Rey could actually make peace and stop the war and bring balance, it would be the opposite of what their grandfathers couldn't do. I also would love it because Kylo and Rey have their whole love thing going on, and with Romeo and Juliet, forbidden romance is a major theme. And the two families fought with each other. So I feel like that would be perfect because the Kenobi family and the Skywalker family have fought with each other, the Kenobis and the Skywalkers. And for the guy and the girl who are from the fighting houses fall in love with each other, I feel like it would just be so perfect. And Obi-Wan didn't fall to the dark side, and Rey hasn't fallen to the dark side. I really want Obi-Wan to appear to Rey and say, "Hello there." Now, moving on from Obi-Wan, let's talk about old Palpatine. Ian McDiarmid returned to voice Palpatine for the finale of Star Wars Rebels. Dave Filoni said when it came to bringing characters from the films onto Star Wars Rebels, that the characters they picked were not fan service. It wasn't for fan service. Filoni said that they had to pick characters that had a purpose, that had something to do with the overall story. I don't think Palpatine was just brought in because he's an iconic villain. Even if they just had Thrawn for the bad guy and for the finale, that still would have been enough. So I feel like the fact they brought Palpatine back into the story makes me think that he's going to have a role in some way in episode 9. Also, this scene with Ezra and Palpatine is very similar to the scene where Rey is looking at that mirror in The Last Jedi. And there's this mirror that Ezra looks at, where he can see his parents. And I talked about this in my Star Wars Rebels finale video, if you want to check that out. But I feel like those two scenes are connected, and I'm going to talk more about that in a different video. So I saw online that there is an illustrated book of The Last Jedi, and you know that moment where Kylo and Rey reach out to touch each other's hands. Well, I guess in the illustrated book that when they touch hands, it says in the illustrated book that not only do they see the future, but they also see the past. And I guess it also says when Rey is thinking to herself, when she is extending her hand out to Kylo, she thinks about the darkness in her. And she thinks if she can overcome her darkness, surely he could as well. Now, I have a couple thoughts on this. One, I'm curious about the whole past thing. Did they see their own past, their childhood, or did they see past of Anakin and ObiWan and the original characters? What past did they see? Yoda has said that you can see the past with the Force. And now my other thing is the whole Rey having darkness in her comment. According to this illustrated book, Rey is acknowledging her darkness and sounds like she's saying she has darkness like Kylo. When I watched The Last Jedi, my impression was that Rey was not scared of the dark side. The dark side didn't really faze her. Usually, light side Force users are scared of the dark side, or they get tempted by it. Really, really tempted. Something I think would be a really cool twist, that I think would be a really cool twist, if Rey was related to both Obi-Wan and Palpatine. I think it would be cool if she was the granddaughter of Obi-Wan and Satine, and then she was a descendant of Palpatine. Because you have two sides of your family. I think that would be cool if part of the reason why Rey is so balanced is because she has family from the dark side and the light side. And I had read a long time ago about an article that Rey was going to be able to harness powers of the dark side, but not turn bad. Now, when I first heard about the Palpatine theory, Rey being related to Palpatine, I absolutely was not crazy about it. But when I've thought about it more and more, I think it'd be cool if she was related to both. I think that'd be a really nice twist. And I think it would be such a great storyline too, in the sense of, you know, do you get to choose your path, or do you just follow the path of your family? And I feel like that would be such a great theme to further explore, because it's like that with Kylo. You know, he's following the path of his grandfather. Feels like, you know, he has to, in a sense. So I feel like that would be really cool to see the choice. Like, you can choose to follow your family, or you can make your own path. And I feel like having a family past that affects you more than having no past, you know, being a nobody, that doesn't really hold you back. Having no past is easy to make choices because you don't have anything affecting you. And I feel like if Rey was related to Palpatine and she still chose to be good, it would be such a nice contrast to Kylo. And there's a couple things that make me think that there might be a connection of Palpatine and Rey. One is the dialogue between Palpatine and Rey for Star Wars Battlefront 2 is very interesting. It's kind of strange. All the characters can interact with each other, and he says to her, "I haven't felt a power like this." And this is the guy who found Vader, right? And he doesn't say really anything bad for Palpatine. He doesn't really say anything bad to Rey, but everybody else he cuts down. And there was an interview not too long ago, and I will find it and I'll put it in the description box so you guys can watch it. And Ian McDiarmid was talking about Palpatine, and he said originally there wasn't really much about him, and he said that he believed at one point that Palpatine once had a human beating heart. I found that comment strange because in all the years of watching Star Wars and from listening to all the cast and people talk about Palpatine, not once until that interview has it ever been implied that Palpatine was not completely evil at any point. Also, there is a Star Wars Expanded Universe storyline where Palpatine is interested in Jakku. And in the old Expanded Universe stuff, Palpatine had a son. Now, the old Expanded Universe storyline with Palpatine having a son was really wacky, but they could change it around and not make it wacky. Now, I always knew that you could hear Palpatine's voice in Rey's vision when he says the whole wipe them out thing. But I didn't know until recently that Palpatine's scream is also in Rey's vision. So in Revenge of the Sith, when Palpatine kills the Masters, he screams, and that scream is used in Rey's vision. So in Force Awakens, when Rey screams no, also it's not just her scream, but also Palpatine's as well in that scene. Force Awakens has been out for a couple years, and I now just caught it. I realized it when I watched Vincent Vendetta's, he had an older theory video about Rey being a Palpatine, and I watched it. And I never knew until I watched his video that Rey's scream and Palpatine's are both in that scene. And Palpatine's scream is in Rey's vision in Force Awakens. I just also think it'd be so interesting to see how Rey has light side and dark side with her heritage. If she was related to both Obi-Wan and Palpatine. What I want the most is for Rey to be Obi-Wan's granddaughter. I want her to be related to Obi-Wan. So if she's related to Obi-Wan, I'll be a happy camper watching episode 9. But I do think it would be really interesting if she was related to both Obi-Wan and Palpatine. I do feel like bringing Palpatine back for the end of Rebels does have significance. And I do think he will have some kind of role in some sort of way in episode 9. So I've said this before in my other videos, but for me, I felt like The Last Jedi was a mashup of The Return of the Jedi and Revenge of the Sith. Really wasn't like Empire Strikes Back, and I actually think that The Last Jedi was more like Revenge of the Sith than Return of the Jedi. I actually felt like it was more like the prequels. For instance, the kids being in The Last Jedi, there were no kids running around in the original series. So it made me think of like Little Annie and the kids on Tatooine with the pod racing and everything. Scenes between Kylo and Rey, without a doubt, were very much like Anakin and Padme. Also, I mentioned this in one of my other videos, I felt like a lot of the scenes with Rey and Kylo were like Anakin and Obi-Wan. And the seriousness to me, I felt like The Last Jedi was serious like Revenge of the Sith. I mean, Revenge of the Sith will always be the saddest one, in my opinion, of the whole Star Wars saga. But it was pretty damn sad. To me, I thought The Last Jedi was pretty sad. Rey was crying, and then Kylo was crying. There was a lot of crying and a lot of sadness. And Rose's sister died in the first 5 minutes, and Kylo's whole please be with me thing, it just it just like still tears my heart out. Also, I felt like the whole sequence of Canto Bight and showing the corrupt people who want to sell weapons for money and want to make money off of war, that's very much like the same plot of the Clone Wars, especially with the animated show. They really go into corrupt people who are using the war for money, who are getting profits from the war. Personally, I think the fighting between the Resistance and the First Order is more like the fighting between the Republic and the Separatists, in my opinion. I think the war with the prequels is more like the war between the Resistance and the First Order than the Empire and the Rebellion. And another reason why I think Episode 9 is really gonna focus on the prequels is because there's really no more story left to tell for the new main film series. Like, yeah, they're going to show us, you know, the whole thing with the First Order and the Resistance, and we know the First Order is going to lose, and they'll show us the whole thing of Kylo and Rey. I'm hoping for a happy ending. But, besides that, though, you know, I mean, it will take some time with the battle scenes and the fight scenes and the scenes in space and all of that. But besides that, though, they still have to fill in time, and the prequels is really the only story that they can really go into now. And that's also why I thought Rey was related to someone, why I thought she was related to Obi-Wan, because her story in The Last Jedi was about her and Kylo, and her story in Force Awakens was about how she met everyone, how she discovered she had the Force and all of that. And so, you know, for episode 9, yeah, it will conclude with her and Kylo. And like I said, I want a happy ending for them. But besides that, though, what else would her story be? You know, just her fighting for the Resistance. There would have to be something else. Like, besides her whole love thing of Kylo, her story arc would be kind of done. Thank you guys so much for watching my video. If you liked it, please give it a big thumbs up and please subscribe. If you have any theories you'd like to share, please let me know what they are in the comment section below. I would love to hear from you guys. Before I close, I just want to talk about Reylo for a second because I always like to talk about them. And there was this hilarious interview with Mark Hamill recently where he talked about Kylo and Rey when they touched hands, when they touched fingers. And he said that was the hottest scene for Star Wars, and the Star Wars sex scene. It made my day. Put a link for the video in the description box because I thought it was so funny. And that sexual energy in The Last Jedi was so strong. It was so obvious. And also, Kelly Marie Tran, the actress who plays Rose, she was in a recent Oh My Disney video, and she talked about how she shipped Kylo and Rey. So both those videos made my day. Though I'm going to be nervous and worried for 2 years about Ben Solo, about him making it. But anyways, guys, I will see you guys next time. And remember, may the Force be with you.